Jira can quickly get overwhelming. Even with their new UI, it's still extremely complex. So no wonder so many people new to the tool struggle to get used to it. But it can provide so much useful information that will make your life easier. Let me show you one key report that you definitely should look into and learn how to read. Hey, it's Jira here. Welcome. Okay, so here are 5 reports that you need to know how to use in Jira. First, Sprint Report. Then, the Velocity Chart. Then, the Release Burndown, Control Chart, and the Epic Report. But in this video, I want to dive into the Sprint Report because it can provide you so much useful information to help you identify improvements the team may implement. You will notice that I don't go into details on the burndown chart that you will see at the very top of the Sprint Report in Jira. The reason is that while it can be useful, I find that most teams do not go to the level of detail that this chart actually needs. Most of the time, teams work on the level of the tickets, user stories in Jira that take several days to complete. But burndown chart is most useful when you break down your tickets to tasks that take about 1 day work. And if you don't do that, I find it much less useful. So I'm not going to go into the burndown chart in the Sprint Report, but instead, let's look at the Sprint Report itself to see what it can actually change for you, what it can actually tell you about your team. Okay, so here I am in Jira. This is just the project. This is our backlog. And we need to go to reports. And then in the list here on the left, we can have the Sprint Report. This is where we are going into find all of our details. I'll move my video around maybe to the top just to make sure that it's not actually blocking the view. Okay, so what are the things that you can see here? There are lots of different reports, obviously, in Jira, and I will look into them at maybe different videos, but today I wanted to look more specifically in the Sprint Report. So here, as you can see, I have the burndown chart, which is not really created for me because I was just doing a test project, really, and a test sprint. This is not real data. So let's see what we can have, what we can find. So right below the burned down chart, we can see all of the other information, and your report most likely is going to be much, much longer, right? So you're not going to see all of the other sections right away. But let's start at the top, the section called Completed Issues. So under the completed issues is where you will be able to see all of the details of the stories, bugs, tech debt, all of the different items that the team had worked on and that had completed. So completed issues, more specifically, is whatever has been in the done column at the end of the sprint when you closed the sprint. And why this is important is that you can actually get the list of all of these items and use it in your sprint review. So you don't really need to create a separate document or anything. You can just pull the information on the tickets that have been completed right here. And if you know how to use the filters and the search functions in Jira, then it will be even easier for you, but I will be looking into that maybe in a different video. And so in this list, you can look into that, everything that has been completed, right? And you can already decide what are the items that we want to talk about in our sprint review. So this can be something that you can then put into your sprint reports that you send out to stakeholders, for example, and you can highlight the items that are maybe most relevant to the stakeholders overall, because most likely you're going to have items that are maybe a bit too technical and not as interesting for the stakeholders. So you are free to really use this information to help you creating the report, really, and the information that you're going to send to your stakeholders. Obviously, the easiest one would be just to screenshot this information and kind of give it to your stakeholders in a report, or to export it into maybe an Excel file. Other thing that you can see right here is actually how many story points have been completed. So this gives you the velocity basically for the sprint. So that shows you that in this particular sprint, if you see here, in this particular sprint, sprint 3, the team was able to complete 41 story point. And that is the kind of the information that you may immediately find right here. I will look into the velocity chart real quickly a bit later to see that number as well. As you scroll further, what you'll find is the section that says issues not completed. So basically, this is everything that was in the sprint at the time that it has been closed, but that was not in the done column. So for example, this particular ticket, it has been in progress when the sprint has been completed. So it means that we have 5 story points. Once again, we can see of the points here. I only have 1 ticket here, but still. Some of the points of the items that we potentially thought we will be able to complete, but did not complete, right? So it was still in progress and it's a carryover. Talking about the carryover, if you are looking for some practical tips on how to address carryover, what to do with it, etc., then check out my video. I do have a video where I go into details of what to do with carryover, how to address it in a more productive way. I'm going to put the link in the description. So with this information, the amount of story points completed and non-completed, you can actually calculate, understand the percentage of work that is carryover. If you look this over several sprints, you can kind of see a pattern. Basically, you just want to divide the number of story points not completed by the sum of the completed plus not completed story points. So everything that the team thought they would be able to accomplish, that we will be using as our baseline. So in this example, we have 41 completed, 5 non-completed. So we'll say 5 divided by 41 plus 5. So in this case, it will be about 11% of carryover, which isn't that bad. So scrolling further, well, I don't need to scroll, everything's already here. If you look further, you will find the section that is called Issues Removed from Sprint. I believe you will only see this section if there was something actually removed from sprint during that sprint. So if we look at sprint 1, where I didn't remove anything from the sprint, as you can see, I can only see the completed and non-completed issues because nothing has been removed from the sprint. Let's go back to our sprint 3. So why is this important? Well, this can be a good indication of how well your team can plan. Because if you have a big number of issues removed from the sprint, it means that maybe your team is taking on a lot of work, they're underestimating, and then in the middle of the sprint, they realize that they would not be able to complete this work, and so they remove it from the sprint. It may also mean that your team is struggling with changing priorities. That can also be a reason for why you have a lot of items in the removed from the sprint. But there are more things to look into apart from just this one section. So you might be asking yourself, why would we remove this even from the sprint? Why don't we just keep it in the sprint? And once we get to maybe the point at the end of the sprint, it will just become a carryover. Same as this CJP 19 ticket that has been a carryover. Well, if the team has understood that they will not be able to accomplish that work, then there is no point in keeping that work in the sprint because it will distract the team from working on other things and actually completing them, right? You don't want to have all of these items in progress and the team kind of dispersing their attention to the other items in the sprint backlog, and instead just remove them. That way the team will be focusing on what is actually in the sprint backlog. And it is absolutely okay to change sprint backlog and move things away, add things in as you learn more, as the team works on whatever they have in the sprint backlog. You usually would remove items that the team hasn't started yet, but here, as you can see, I have removed one of the items that was already in progress, so that might also happen. Another reason for why items might be removed from the sprint backlog is maybe the team or the product owner realized that this is no longer important. So the same, why would we keep it in the sprint backlog if we don't want to work on it, if it's not important? Just remove it. So I said that issues removed can be a good indication of some maybe planning issues or overcommitment. So what is that other thing? So as I mentioned, issues removed is just one of the things we need to look into. There is one more important point to look for in the sprint report that you can find right here, but will require a bit of manual work, I'd say. And this information is about the story points or issues added into the sprint. So if you look at the name of, the key of the issue, to the right, you'll see a little asterisk right here. And this asterisk, what it means is that this issue has been added to the sprint. So if you actually hover over your mouse, you will see a little tooltip that says issue added to the sprint after start time. So you can see in this report that there has been 1, 2, 3 issues that have been added into the sprint during this sprint, and 1, 2, 3 that have been removed. Note that these issues show both in completed issues and non-completed issues, right? So you might have both. And we can calculate here actually how much work has been added. Unfortunately, Jira does not give you that number automatically, so you do need to manually calculate it. So let's look at it. We have a 5, a 5, and a 5. Easy. 15 story points that have been added into the sprint. And then if we look at the items removed, 29 have been removed. So if we see that here, for example, we have one issue that we have added, but we have not completed. Clearly, we have added this issue without really realizing that maybe we don't have capacity for it. And so if your team has a tendency, for example, to have lots of issues that have been added and not completed, right? You have just tendency always having items in here. Let's maybe see a different sprint. Did I have anything here? I didn't add anything into this second sprint. So in the first sprint, I had added a few, but they have been completed, the one that I added. So what can this information tell you? Well, if you have a lot of issues in the issues not completed that also have been added, so there with the little asterisk, it means that the team has taken a lot of new work into the sprint without actually considering whether they can complete it. So that can be something to look out for really for the team. Why are we adding new work into our sprint if we don't think we can complete it? Or do we even have this discussion when we add new work, whether we are able to complete it? Now, if you have an opposite problem where you have maybe a lot of items sitting in the completed issues that have been added, while a lot of items sitting in the non-completed issues are the items that have been there from the beginning, well, it means that your team is not properly planning. It means that they are taking on the work into the sprint at the beginning of the sprint that they actually don't complete. And instead, they prefer to take in new work during the sprint that they work on. So it means that why are we prioritizing less important items at the beginning of the sprint and only later think about adding new, more important work, it seems? So the question to ask there would be, one of the things that it might be that we don't have enough refinement. So when we go into the sprint planning, we don't have enough information. So we kind of grab work, whatever we have there that is refined, and then later we figure out that it was not as important. Or it might be just the reason that the team just picks up some work because they want to. It looks maybe more interesting. There are many reasons. So there is a question to ask the team, why are we picking up new work and working on this new work instead of following through with our initial plan? So we're going to do a bit of formulas to trying to get some extra information from the sprint report. So when you look at the information of how much work has been completed plus non-completed, that will give you the sum of these. So this will be 41 plus 5, 46. Will give you the general idea of how much work there was in the sprint when it was closed. Then another important number could be how much work the team thought they could accomplish. And this you won't actually find here, but you can find in the velocity chart. So if you go back to your list of reports, you can find the velocity chart right here, and you can see, well, this team, more specifically, seems to like to overcommit. And as you can see, you have the list of sprints right here, and you have the column with commitment, as in how many story points we thought we will be able to accomplish when we started the sprint, and completed, how much work we actually accomplished. So in sprint 3, we thought we will be able to do 60, right? But we were only able to complete 41. So that is the commitment is an important number to also have in your mind when you're looking into this graph, into your sprint report. So why do we need that number, right? From the velocity chart, how much work we have, that commitment? Because now with the other information we have on our sprint report, we can look at the percentage of work that is generally getting changed with the team. That will give us a way to calculate the percentage of change the team is experiencing during the sprint. So how do we actually calculate that change? Well, we will sum our items that have been removed. So that is a change, right? So we have removed 29 points from the sprint. And then we know that we have added 15, right? So we calculated these items that have been added. So we can say 15 plus 29 is 44. And this is the amount of change. Basically, we have changed 44 story points. And our initial commitment was 60. So if we were just to divide our change by our commitment, and we'll do this, 44 divided by 60 by 100%. So we have a 73% change. So we had a pretty big change for this sprint overall in terms of the amount of work that we switched. This number, 73%, does this mean that something really, really bad is happening? Well, no. There are more things to look into. First of all, sprint backlog is supposed to change. It is normal. So just the fact that these items are changing doesn't necessarily mean that something bad is happening. But it can give us some insight. I would say that if your backlog changes by more than 50%, which is our case, it is a bit concerning, and you definitely need to look into that and look into other stats and other information in your sprint report to help you identify whether it's a problem. So here we are at an example of sprint 4. It is still an active sprint, so it hasn't started yet, right? But what we can see is obviously issues not completed because we're still in the middle of the sprint. But what we can see is there are 5 items in here, but only 1 was there from the beginning. It means that most of the work that we have in the sprint has been added later. If we see this happening, there are a few questions we can ask. Why have those items been added after the start of the sprint? Is it because other items in progress maybe got stuck somewhere and we had nothing else to do, so we started to pick up new work from the product backlog? Or maybe it is because generally the team has been out of work. It doesn't seem like it because this item is still in progress. It means that we picked up new work afterwards. So that is definitely concerning that we can see in the middle of the sprint. But is it just because the team felt that, okay, we have more time, we can definitely take in new work? Is it that? Because that wouldn't be that bad, right? Then we can start looking into information kind of in more detail, as in how much work has been added versus how much work has not been completed. So in this case, we know that 15 points have been added, but only 5 points were not completed. It seems that we're not really taking on too much additional work, and especially is that we're removing something from the sprint. So it means that we're replacing the work, right? So we're taking something new, but then we say, well, if we take this new item, we need to remove something else, and that kind of levels out the field here. But for example, if your team has added 25 new story points, but they have not completed 50 story points, so they have 25 new and 50 have not been completed, they're still sitting in the not completed column, well, that is concerning. It means that we have taken 25 new story points even though we were already behind. Most likely we knew that we won't be able to complete it all. Why did we take on that work? It doesn't make any sense, right? So there must have been a reason for that decision, right? So if we take in new work, we don't remove anything, and we clearly are unable to achieve that amount of work, then that kind of reminds me of this meme. Why are we trying to put in more than what we have the capacity for? Generally, it is always a good idea to replace the work, right? So if we're adding something new, we added this new 5 items, 5 story points, let's remove something else, right? So, well, here we have something, 8 story points, let's remove it. That way we replace it, and if we're out of work, nothing to do, we'll go back to the product backlog and we'll take it. You can quickly do kind of a visual analysis of what is going on in the sprint report. If you see issues not completed, if you see a lot of asterisks, that can give you some information. Like here, for example, nothing has been added. You can quickly scan it visually, see that, okay, it seems like sprint 2 has been going good. We didn't add anything. And here we can see a bit of just a general idea of what's going on, just looking at it, right? The first sprint wasn't that good because we have not completed 24 and only completed 31, right? It seems that we really have committed to way too much work. And then, as I said, just quickly looking at your completed list, you can also do some analysis, just looking at, do we have too much work that has been added that has been completed? Right, as I said, you can quickly look into these quick, not even numbers, but just visually looking at the report to give you a general idea of what it could be. And with this information, what you can use this for is actually going into your sprint planning and asking the questions around what you have observed in your report, right? If your team seems to be taking in new work during the sprint, you can ask questions. Why are we talking about work in our sprint planning that may not be as important? Why aren't we focusing on the more important work? Or are we taking in too much work? We have a tendency to overcommit and then we have to remove items from our sprint. There are some questions that you can definitely ask based on what you see in your sprint report, but just this one report can be extremely useful for you, right? And then combined with the velocity chart, here you can see just the tendency, overall tendency of the team. Do we commit, overcommit? How is it going kind of for us? Do we have a tendency? Do we have a general consistency of how much work we can accomplish? For example, if we just look at this velocity chart, we can say, it seems like we really decided to commit to a lot of work in sprint 3, while we have never delivered that much work. So why did we do it? Why did we try to commit to that much work? Doesn't make that much sense, right? And in the same way, the sprint report can give you a lot of that information to help you really just find what would be the best questions to ask in the sprint planning to help your team be more consistent in their forecasting. There are lots of questions that you can be asking your team using the information provided by a single report. A must-know point I want to make here, though, is that these numbers on their own do not represent team's performance and should not be used in that way. If you want to learn more about that, check out my video on velocity, and link will be in the description as usual. Use the information you get from this report and all of those calculations to find what questions you can ask your team. Asking open, powerful questions is how you can start coaching your team to their greatness. I think I'll do a little deep dive into some powerful questions you can ask your team at the end of the sprint in my upcoming newsletter. So if you're not subscribed yet, well, definitely do so. It's free. And we're over 4,200 newsletter subs already. Anyway, a quick recap. In this video, we looked at how you can use Jira Sprint Report to collect valuable information about your team's effectiveness, really. Sprint Report can give you information on completed and not completed work, on issues removed from the sprint and added to the sprint, and on team's velocity. But more importantly, it can give you insights into how your team can improve and how you can help them do that. I hope you learned something new, and if you did, well, you know it, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to this YouTube channel, and I'll see you next time. Cheers and Scrum on!